Adelaide about this instruction. It was not easy. He had to take her on a drive. They parked somewhere in a park because now he was going to tell her something that was going to change their lives so much. He was about to leave the country, leave her behind, and not knowing when he would come back. And I guess not knowing how he would survive. But he said to his wife, I cannot say no to the movement, so I will have to go. And indeed he went in March 1960. His wife was to follow in 6 months' time. And his mandate was to get international support for the struggle against apartheid, for the ANC, so that the international community could put pressure on the apartheid government in order to make sure that the apartheid government agreed to negotiations with the representatives of the people. But they were very careful that they didn't want the international world to take over. They wanted support for the ANC and the people of South Africa in their struggle against apartheid. During the 30 years that the ANC in exile was fighting, there were many challenges that Oliver Tambo faced as firstly the acting president and later president of the ANC. He regarded his first job as keeping the ANC together. And when some of those who had joined him, who were members of the ANC, complained that at certain stages it looked like there was nothing effective that the ANC was doing, he kept their hope by telling them that ultimately victory against apartheid was certain. It seems that no matter what happened, he was very clear that victory was certain. I talked about his humility. It is said that when he visited the Quattro camp, which had a lot of abuses that happened, Oliver Tambo, during meal times, would stand in a queue like everybody, and after eating would wash his plates just like everybody. He didn't say, I'm the head of this organization. The conditions were hard. When everybody slept on the floor because there were no beds, he slept on the floor too. He didn't look for a bed for himself. When his wife complained to him in London that whenever he visited home, he would still have a lot of ANC people who wanted to see him, even though he was at home, and therefore would end up not having time for the children. his answer was to say, but there are those comrades who are on Robben Island who don't even get a chance to see their children. Which meant that he was saying, whatever our situations, we must remember that there are some who are in a worse situation, and the struggle that we are in demands that we go through these challenges. During the first 10 years of his exile, it is said that Oliver Tambo would hardly get a chance to see his family 4 times in 6 months. He was always busy with the work that he had been given. While in exile, 2 big conferences were held under his leadership. The Morogoro Conference in 1969 and the Cabo Conference in 1985. And when you look at how he dealt with them, with the conferences, you can see the Democrat in Oliver Tambo. Even when there were some who were criticizing him and saying that he was always traveling, he listened to them, allowed them the opportunity to criticize him, and dealt with issues. He was a true Democrat. At the Kabwe Conference, some of those who were in leadership positions suggested that the voting for the election of the new NEC should be by way of a slate, so that it would be a group of candidates and you vote for all of them. And Tambo said, no, the ballot will be secret in order to make sure that those who would be elected would have been elected properly. Oliver Tambo succeeded in gaining support from various countries in the world and organizations to support the struggle against apartheid, and some to support the ANC. And many people joined in putting pressure on the apartheid government. Sanctions were imposed against the apartheid government. But around 1985, somehow Oliver Tambo sensed that the time was right for the ANC to begin to be ready for negotiations. And 1985 is the year when some of you who are old enough here may remember, was the year when P.W. Botha, who was president of South Africa, failed to cross the Rubicon. It was the year when there was a big hullabaloo that he was going to give a big speech in which he would announce the unbanning of political organizations and the removal of various apartheid laws. It was said that the speech had been written by Big Botha, who was known to be more liberal than some of the ministers in P.W. Botha's cabinet. But ultimately, P.W. Botha apparently got cold feet and did not make that speech. On the contrary, he made a speech in which he was very belligerent and said to all of us, don't push me too far, with a finger that he was wagging. The following day, Oliver Tambo called a press conference and said P.W. Botha suffered from cold feet. But then he made a call which proved to be very important in advancing the struggle against apartheid and in putting pressure on the apartheid government to seriously consider negotiations. He called upon business, church organizations, students, intellectuals, and professionals to reach out to the ANC to talk about the future of this country. And indeed, in months that followed, there were various deputations, people from churches, people from business and intellectuals who went to see the ANC, even against the wishes of the apartheid government. And more pressure was put on the apartheid government. What is the kind of country that Oliver Tambo and his peers wanted for this country? They wanted a democratic and non-racial and a non-sexist South Africa. They wanted a South Africa where people would have houses. They wanted a South Africa where children will get proper education that would give them jobs, that would enable them to take their rightful place in the economy of the country. They wanted a South Africa in which women would feel free to walk the streets. They wanted a South Africa in which all of us would prosper. And they were prepared to sacrifice a lot in order to achieve that. The question that arises is whether since '94 we have advanced their vision, we have advanced their dream, we have honored their sacrifices. And Oliver Tambo passed on before 27 April 1994, when we had that big election. Having worked so hard and having made such an immense contribution to the liberation of this country, he was unable to taste how freedom was like. That places a lot of burden on all of us. To do whatever we can to make sure that the country that South Africa is the country for which he and others like Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Robert Sobukwe, Steve Biko fought for. And if we turn this country into a country that has no resemblance to the one they envisioned, it would mean we show no appreciation for the huge sacrifices that they made. But when one looks at the journey that we have traveled as a country from 1994, and we look at where we are, there are many things that we see every day which are the opposite of what these leaders sacrificed for. There are many things, features of South African life, which are completely in conflict with the kind of South Africa that Oliver Tambo worked for and sacrificed so much for. I had, as you all know, the honor and privilege to chair the State Capture Commission. Which revealed a lot of corruption that has taken place in this country and continues to take place. Some of the people who are behind the state capture and corruption are people who themselves sacrificed a lot in order to ensure that apartheid was defeated. But they do not have the kinds of values that OR Tambo had. Some of them want to make sure that they eat first and their families eat first. And have no shame that they knew Oliver Tambo personally, and that wherever he is, and people like Madiba would turn in their graves when they see what they are doing. Oliver Tambo was passionate about education. He would have been very aggrieved by the fact that the government has failed to give our youth the kind of education that enables them to be employable and to contribute meaningfully to our economy. It is said that when the ability of primary school learners in South Africa to read with understanding and to count is compared with many countries, including countries within the SADC region, the South African learners rank either the lowest or very close to the lowest. I think Oliver Tambo would find it very difficult to understand why the government of South Africa has failed to ensure that the ability of primary school learners in South Africa to read with understanding and to count, when compared with those countries, ranks high. Oliver Tambo would have been very unhappy that there are hundreds of thousands of black learners in this country who attend schools which have got no libraries, who attend schools made of mud, and who attend schools in rural areas that still have pit toilets. He would find it unforgiving that 30 years into our democracy, there are primary school learners who die because they fall into pit toilets at schools. He would have been surprised that there are still learners who have to walk 10 kilometers or more to get to school every day because of lack of development in the areas where they live and where the schools are. He would have been very concerned about learners who drown trying to cross rivers when it is raining, either going to school or coming from school, because the government has failed over many years to build bridges for them so that they do not drown. He would have been very happy about the fact that the government built many houses for poor people in our country, but he would be very unhappy to see many housing projects in various parts of our country where millions and millions of rands were paid to contractors by government for the construction of houses, but the contractors took the money and left without building any houses at all, or where they started building some structures but left without completing the houses. Not only would he be unhappy about the fact that taxpayers' money was wasted by the government in regard to such housing projects, but he would also be disappointed that in many of these cases, government has not held its own officials accountable and has not recovered the money from those contractors. It is said that there are many reasons for such incidents. One is that government officials corruptly award tenders to people who have no knowledge or competence or capacity or experience in such projects, and the contractors live with the money when they meet with certain challenges in carrying out the project. It is also said that sometimes the tender is awarded to a contractor who does have the capacity or competence and experience, but the problem is that in order for him or her to be awarded the tender, he would have been asked by corrupt government officials to agree in advance that if he or she was awarded the tender, he or she would give a certain percentage of the money he or she makes out of that contract to certain government officials or their friends or family. When the contractor has done some work on the project, he or she realizes that he does not make any profit out of the project, or makes so negligible a profit out of the project that it does not make business sense for him or her to continue with the project, because it means he or she is working very hard, but only for someone else who has done no work to get all the money. The government then does not pursue the recovery of such money, because any case that may go to court would be likely to reveal government officials' involvement in the corruption. That is in respect of both civil and criminal matters. In other cases, the problem that poor people find is that the contractors that government departments appoint to build them houses have no idea or experience in construction of houses and have never constructed even a single house, but they put in bids for building tenders on the basis that they will appoint as a partner another company that has competence and experience in the construction of houses. However, if a dispute arises between the two companies before the project is completed, the company with experience and capacity may leave before the project is completed, and the company that has competence or experience then also just disappears at that stage. Although there are many projects which are never completed, whether they are for housing or for something else, we hardly hear of any consequences, disciplinary, civil or criminal, which are visited upon government officials who would have made decisions that resulted in the loss of millions and millions of taxpayers' money. Since there are no consequences for wrongdoing in so many cases, corruption, fraud, and theft have increased tremendously in our country over the years. Nevertheless, one must acknowledge that of late, the SIU does seem to be working hard to recover certain proceeds of corruption. An example of an instance where this was done was the Free State Asbestos Project debacle that the State Capital Commission had a lot of evidence about. That is the case where a company called Blackhead Consulting sought from and was awarded by the Free State Department of Human Settlements a contract for 250 million rand for removing asbestos from township houses in the Free State, despite the fact that it had nobody with qualifications required by law for the removal of asbestos. and had no experience of doing such projects. That company sought to be turned on the basis that it did have qualifications and experience for such a job, but in saying so, it was making a misrepresentation to the department because it had no such qualifications. And its managing director, Mr. Zondo, confessed under questioning in the commission. The same Provincial Department of Human Settlements in the Free State was also involved in the 1 billion rand housing project, where the department was required to build 10,000 RDP houses for 1.3 billion rand for poor people. But it paid over 600 million rand to contractors, but could not even say how many houses had been built. There were many places where only foundations had been constructed, but nothing else. The State Capture Commission also had evidence of a similar transaction in relation to PRASA, in terms of which PRASA awarded Swifambo a contract of more than 3.5 billion rand to manufacture train locomotives and provide them to PRASA, and yet Swifambo had no expertise or experience of manufacturing locomotives. Fortunately, that contract was subsequently set aside by the courts on, among others, the basis that the transaction was tainted by corruption. By allowing the Gupta-Zuma state capture to happen as was found by the State Capture Commission, the government and the ruling party betrayed Oliver Tambo. The majority party in Parliament, which included members of the National Executive who were members of the National Assembly, prevented the institution of parliamentary inquiries, which would have revealed at a very early stage serious evidence of state capture before a lot of taxpayers' money could be stolen by the Guptas. They said that the investigations should be conducted by the law enforcement agencies that they knew were unlikely to reveal anything, or that would in any event take years to complete, while the Guptas and Mr. Zuma were continuing with their state capture projects to the detriment of the people of South Africa. The majority party in Parliament made sure that motions of no confidence in President Zuma, initiated by opposition parties, were defeated over a long period as evidence mounted which showed that the Guptas were involved in wrongdoing. Indeed, not only did the ruling party and its top officials and its NEC ensure that Parliament did not investigate the allegations of state capture against the Guptas and President Zuma over many years, but they also failed to act against Mr. Zuma and the Guptas, who were members of the ANC, on other occasions when they were alerted to what was going on and when recommendations were made that they should act. In 2011, a member of the NEC of the ANC told a meeting of the ANC that before President Zuma could inform him that he was going to be promoted to the position of minister, he said he had been told by the Guptas that he was going to be appointed as minister. 2 years later, in 2013, as Mr. Mantashe revealed in his evidence before the State Capture Commission, the Integrity Committee of the ANC made a recommendation to the ANC that Mr. Zuma should step down, but the NEC ignored that recommendation, and the Guptas continued with their looting of public resources. If the NEC had acted on that recommendation and had recalled Mr. Zuma as president of the country, that could have halted the Gupta state capture and all the state capture transactions that happened in 2013 and in the years thereafter could have been avoided. The NEC's failure to act on the recommendation of its own structure, the Integrity Committee, led to billions and billions of taxpayers' money being taken out of the country by the Guptas. Oliver Tambo would have been shocked to learn from the report of the State Capture Commission that the amounts that were paid by the organs of state to entities directly controlled by the Guptas were in the region of 58 billion rand. In one of her recent reports on the state of municipalities in the country, excuse me, the Auditor General reported that the majority of this country's 250 or so municipalities are dysfunctional or are on the brink of collapse. She also reported that last year, out of the 44 municipalities which got clean audits, which means more than 200 others failed to get clean audits, about 21 were in the Western Cape. It is likely that those 21 municipalities in the Western Cape are not controlled by the ruling party. This therefore means that the overwhelming majority of the municipalities that are controlled by the ruling party did not get clean audits. To make things worse, this is not a case where in one isolated financial year, those municipalities did not get clean audits. This is a case where if you consulted the Auditor General's reports of previous years, you will find that those municipalities have not been getting clean audits over many years. And not only are they not improving their performance, but every year their performance has been getting worse and worse. And the government and Oliver Tambo's organization have been ignoring the Auditor General's reports and doing nothing about those municipalities. This is something that Oliver Tambo would have been very unhappy about, because in order for the people who were under apartheid to get proper services and to have a better life, there must be municipalities that are functional, that deliver services. And when municipalities are dysfunctional, it means they will not be able to deliver services. Why do I raise the issue of municipalities in the context of this lecture? I raise it because this is a lecture in memory of someone who was a leader of the ANC, which is the ruling party, and has been the ruling party over the past 29 years, and who made enormous sacrifices throughout his adult life in order to ensure not only that the people of this country who were oppressed got political freedom, but also that they got national, provincial, and local governments which ensured that they got the services they deserve. I believe that because Oliver Tambo was a man of integrity and a man of truth, he would tell the current government and his organization, you cannot reconcile your conduct in allowing so many municipalities to collapse, which means they won't be able to deliver services needed by the people, with a commitment to serve the people, with any notion that you care about the people. What we have done in this regard is not what a person or organization that cares about people does. That is what Oliver Tambo's truthfulness and integrity would have driven him to tell the government and his organization. The question that arises is, how many leaders within the ANC and government are prepared to admit this truth, apologize for their failure, and stop promising to do something about the matter, but actually get on with doing what they're supposed to do. Do what Oliver Tambo, who cared so much about the people, would have got done. The answer is, unfortunately, very few. Many will seek to defend the indefensible because they think that is how to show how committed they are to Oliver Tambo's organization and its government, but that is not so. Most of you will know that what the Auditor General reported about municipalities is not confined to municipalities. The evidence that I had in the State Capture Commission revealed that the same thing happened to a number of state-owned entities that are very important in this country. There was a time when DENEL was an organization that belonged to some of the best organizations of its kind internationally, an organization that was the envy of many in the world. There was a time when ESCOM was one of the top organizations of its kind in the world. There was a time when SARS was an envy of tax collection agencies in the world. There was a time when Transnet was also one of the best in the world. There was a time when the South African Airways was a well-respected airline internationally. There was a time when the Post Office was at least functional and functioning satisfactorily. Over the past 15 or so years, these organizations have slid right to the bottom. Denel faced liquidation in the past few years, and there was a time when it could not pay its own employees' salaries, and the employees had to go to court to get an order that they be paid their salaries. Denel was almost brought to its knees because the cabinet appointed to the board of Denel in 2015 people who were connected with the Guptas and who allowed those who were pursuing the agenda of state capture to pursue it at Denel. The chairperson of that board would have been approved by the cabinet and probably by the deployment committee of the ANC. He was an attorney who had previously been struck off the role of attorneys for misconduct, which had a connection with dishonesty before he was readmitted after some years. SAA is another state-owned entity which found itself in a liquidation process in the past few years. South African Express, which was also the subject of much evidence in the State Capture Commission, has been liquidated. The post office, as I've said, is almost dysfunctional. Eskom has a debt in the region of 500 billion rand, and the people of South Africa have been subjected to many years of load shedding with no end in sight. SARS was captured by Bain and Company and reached a point where it was simply a shadow of the glorious organization that it once was. Fortunately now, with new leadership, SARS seems to have made a lot of progress to turn itself around. About the post office, I don't know if it will be turned around. The problems in these state-owned entities did not mushroom at once. The decline happened over a number of years, but nothing effective was done by the government and the ruling party to not only arrest the decline, but also to turn them around. The decline happened under the watch of the government and under the watch of the ruling party. Oliver Tambo would have been disappointed about this failure. Since Oliver Tambo was a man of integrity and truth, he would have asked the leaders of government and the leaders of his party this question. Please don't laugh at my Zulu accent when I'm trying this Xhosa. Anindixelele ngenyani nohlulwa yintoni. Anazi ukuthi kufanele nenzeni. Xa ningazi yintoni nje ningafuni abantu abaziyo ze basombulule le ngxaki. Xa niyazi ukuthi kumele nenzeni yintoni ningazilungisanga lezi zinto yonke le minyaka. Loosely translated, tell me in all honesty, why are you failing to fix these problems? Do you not know what to do? If you do not know what to do, why do you not get people who know what to do so that they can fix these problems? If you know what to do to fix these problems, why have you not fixed them all these years? That's what Oliver Tambo, I believe, would ask government and his party. There can be no doubt that part of the reason why the majority of the country's municipalities are dysfunctional or are on the brink of collapse is that some of the people who are appointed to certain key positions do not have the right qualifications or competence for positions in which they are appointed. Or if they do have the right qualifications and competence, the problem may be that they lack integrity. If they do not have the right qualifications and competence, then the problem is that they will have been appointed to those positions as a favor, and they know it. The result is that they are beholden to the people who made sure that they were appointed to those positions, despite not having the right qualifications and competence. And they will therefore do whatever they can to return the favor to those who did them a favor. If they have got the right qualifications and competence, but they lack integrity, you will still end up with an entity that is ravaged by corruption and wrongdoing. The report of the State Capture Commission reveals, for example, how in the case of Transnet and Eskom, certain people who may have had the right qualifications and competencies, lacked integrity, and assisted the capture of those important entities by the Guptas or their associates. I do not suggest that the dysfunctionality of many municipalities is due only to wrong appointments. I'm sure that there are other factors that have led to this state of affairs of many of these municipalities, but wrong appointments must play a very important role. The appointment of certain officials in government includes the national government, provincial government, and municipalities, is a matter in which the ruling party's deployment committees at different levels have an interest, because as the evidence in the State Capture Commission revealed, the ruling party's deployment policy is that quite apart from its deployees who are political office bearers, people who occupy many positions of strategic importance in the public service should be people who are loyal to it. For that reason, the ruling party's deployment committee informs ministers which people should be appointed to those positions in the public service. I do not think that anyone has any objection to any political party that wins an election deploying its members to certain political positions, but the bone of contention relates to when a political party seeks to ensure that one of the factors taken into account in filling positions in the public service is that a person must be a member of a particular political party or must owe allegiance or be loyal to a particular political party. In this regard, it is appropriate to remind everybody that in its report, the State Capture Commission referred to, among others, Section 11(2)(a) and (b) of the Public Service Act. These provisions are to the effect that in making any appointments or filling any positions in the public service, A, and I quote, all persons who qualify for appointment, transfer, or promotion concerned shall be considered, and B, the evaluation of persons shall be based on training, skills, competence, knowledge, and the need to redress the imbalances of the past to achieve a public service broadly representative of the South African people, including representations according to race, gender, and disability. Section 11(2) does not mention loyalty to any political party as a factor that must be taken into account in evaluating the candidature of any candidate. I've noted that in response to the State Capture Commission's report with regard to the ANC deployment policy and its implementation, the ruling party has been emphatic that there is nothing unlawful about this policy, but I've not had any response to the point that membership of or loyalty to any political party is not one of the factors that Section 11(2)(b) of the Public Service Act says may be taken into account in evaluating the candidature of any candidate. What nevertheless I find most encouraging is the Public Service Professionalization Program that has been approved by the Cabinet and that the Public Service Commission is pursuing. That program does not accommodate taking into account membership of any political party or loyalty to any political party in the filling of any positions in the public service. If this program is implemented properly, it could go a long way in ensuring that our public service is professionalized and that people who are employed in public service carry out their functions with no regard to any political party and with no preference to any political party. Nevertheless, in dealing with the issue of corruption, wrong appointments of people who do not have qualifications or competence in certain positions provides fertile ground for corruption. If there is any one thing that we should fight with all we have if we want to honor Oliver Tambo's memory, it is corruption and state capture. And those who fight corruption need to be protected. And those who blow the whistle to say there is corruption, there is fraud, there is state capture, need to be protected. And they need to be rewarded if their information leads to the recovery of money that otherwise would have been lost to the taxpayers of this country. And also, we need to show no tolerance for corruption and fraud. We should show no tolerance. And if we show tolerance, we must know we are betraying the values that Oliver Tambo used to guide his direction and to guide his fight. I know that in this institution, there are serious matters relating to corruption. And I think it is important that all of us give the leaders of this institution encouragement to continue to fight corruption. It is important that those who pursue corruption know that they have no support. They have no place to hide. And we, all of us, must play our role. We must not leave everything to the police. We need to support the police. We need to use whatever powers we have, because it is not good enough to leave everything to the police when you know you have evidence and when you can find evidence that there is corruption and there is fraud. And if you are in the case of an employer, can suspend or dismiss somebody who faces serious allegations of fraud and corruption and in respect of whom there is proper evidence. I've taken too long, for which I apologize, Program Director and the Vice Chancellor. But I want to take this opportunity to once again say it was an honor and a privilege that I was invited to deliver this lecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not here to spoil this one. You may please remain standing if you want. But I want to call upon Kangilani Makasi to come forward. Kangilani. Is that or is that? Yeah. No, yeah. CJ, the unprompted Kangilani Makasi, Justice. Right. What I became aware of, only now that I'm sitting there, that Kangilani has a surprise for you.
Oh.
And I don't want to spoil it because it's him.
Oh.
He's a student in the department. He's going to introduce himself to you.
Yeah.
And then the surprise will be revealed.
Oh, okay.
And I'm going to ask you, Dr. Potela. Dr. Potela is his lecturer. Sunday, but I want the glory to belong here. I'm going to go and sit down. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Dr. Potela.
Molweni. Igama lami Khangelani Makhasi ngoCentana.